Hello, and welcome to Software AG's Smart Manufacturing panel with Software AG Government Solutions. Smart manufacturing, also known as Industry 4.0, refers to the use of advanced technologies such as artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, machine learning, robotics, and big data analytics to enhance the efficiency and productivity of manufacturing processes. The digitization and automation approach aims to create a fully integrated, collaborative system that responds in real time to meet changing demands and conditions in the factory, the supply network, and customer needs. The goal of our conversation today is to hear different perspectives on what smart manufacturing means to the aerospace and defense industry and the vital role of data. I would like to welcome our panel of industry thought leaders today, Jahida Lakuhani from AWS, Barandino Barada from MXD, and our very own Sean Riley from Software AG. Can you each go ahead and provide our viewers a little bit about your role and background in smart manufacturing? We'll go ahead and start with you, Jada.
Thanks, Daniel. I'm responsible for worldwide industry go-to-market for AWS IoT and robotics. Been in the industry, in the industrial space for pretty much my entire professional career, coming up 25 years, worked for several organizations like GE, Rockwell, Cummins before I joined AWS. I joined AWS to build the industrial vertical, and then worked in Amazon logistics for many years, which actually got me hands-on working on many of the stuff that many of our customers do in the area of smart manufacturing. And now I lead AWS IoT for industry go-to-market.
Awesome. And we can go ahead and go to you, Barandino.
Thanks, Danielle. So I'm Barandino Barada. I'm the CEO of MXD, which stands for Manufacturing Times Digital. So we are one of 17 manufacturing innovation institutes around the nation. We're all public-private partnerships working to help advance innovation and technology adoption in manufacturing to really strengthen our U.S. manufacturing. I've been with the Institute for 4 years. At MXD, we are focused on digital manufacturing, digital, smart, Industry 4.0. You can almost use them interchangeably, but we're really focused on helping the implementation of the digital thread, the movement of data throughout the product development lifecycle. We are also a second mission as the National Center for Cybersecurity and Manufacturing, trying to help secure our nation's 240,000 manufacturers. And we do it through bringing people together. This webinar is an example of it. How do we get on the line, share information, share thoughts, but we also help advance technology innovation and adoption and train the workforce of tomorrow so that we not only have the technology we need, but also the skilled workers to meet that need. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Happy to have you. And for you, Sean?
Thanks, Danielle. I'm the Global Vice President of Go-to-Market Industry Solutions, where I run the global industry team. I also focus on go-to-market for the manufacturing and logistics verticals directly. I've been with Software AG now for a dozen years. And prior to that, I spent about a dozen years in various supply chain, logistics, and manufacturing roles. So I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing that little bit about yourselves. And I'm sure as everyone else here, we're excited to hear everyone's perspective. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. So our first question we have, as you all know, we are living in an era of technology. Everything that we do today has a technology footprint. Fundamentally, it has changed the way we make things, reduce costs, better, safer, and most importantly, faster. Where have you seen impact of smart manufacturing, and how do you think it will evolve in the future?
Well, if it's okay, I'll jump in first. The largest impact we see is with companies really understanding that there is a new way forward into the future, and that's not bound strictly by automation or by labor, but it's now bound by the combination of using those technologies in conjunction with the industrial Internet of Things to drive new innovations. And while you're seeing great advantages in terms of cost, quality, and maintenance, the real innovation is on how jobs change around the factory floor and what that means for the future. And specifically what I mean by this is prior to IIoT, if an engineer wanted to monitor a piece of equipment, it was a manual monitoring process. Collecting data was manual, analyzing data was manual, and therefore that gave rise to items like the time-based predictive maintenance schedule. I've got a piece of equipment, it's on the shop floor, it's been there for X amount of time, so therefore I have to provide maintenance on this particular piece of equipment at this time. Maybe that equipment is run for 1,000 hours during that time. Maybe it's ran for 80. No one was really quite sure, but because the simple gathering of that data was so difficult and cumbersome, the maintenance schedule was planned, and again, based on that time-based schedule. It's just one example of how a new way forward is looking at how are these jobs done in a more efficient, more complete manner moving forward based on smart manufacturing initiatives and capabilities.
Maybe I can build on that. So, as a manufacturing innovation institute, we don't make anything. We're not selling solutions. We really try to engage with a lot of different solution providers and manufacturers. And the last few years with the pandemic, we've seen an acceleration. And the good news is we see it just from engagement, but IoT Analytics surveyed a whole bunch of manufacturers. And in 2019, only 25% of those surveyed had adopted Industry 4.0 technologies and their operations. That jumped to 72% last year when they reran the survey. So industries realized if I can't bring my workers to the facility, I need to bring it to the cloud. I need to have that ability to monitor their operations and make smart decisions when you're not physically there. And it builds off what Sean said, right? If you don't need to be there to monitor a machine, now you're getting value out of that. But what's interesting in the evolution is that more and more the worker is becoming the heart. And if you look at Industry 3.0, it was bringing computers and automation and robots to manufacturing. 4.0 created that cyber physical. How do you take the virtual representation and the physical representation, you bring them together? Industry 5.0 is bringing the worker in the loop. How do you start making all of these processes focused around how the worker can be more effective, more efficient in what they do? And I think that's a natural evolution of taking this technology, taking this data, and making it more actionable so that the people doing their jobs are better at what they do, which ultimately means the factory and the company is more effective.
Awesome. Thank you. Jada, did you have anything to add?
No, I think Sean and Bernardino pretty much covered it all.
Perfect. I, for one, am all for any type of technology that's going to make my job easier and make me seem more efficient and better. So thank you all for those responses. On to our second question. In the context of technology-based solutions, how does digital transformation play a role in smart manufacturing? What do you feel are the priority focus areas, and what are the areas of improvement from your perspective?
I can jump in over here, Danielle. So if you look at digital transformation, it plays a very significant role, as a matter of fact, a huge role in smart manufacturing. For example, at AWS, we work with customers in the industrial and manufacturing space to improve their process performance and productivity, help reduce quality defects, inventory tracking, operations management, safety, you name it. To give you an example, to call it home, one of our customers in the FMCG vertical actually used AWS IoT, to Sean's point, to digitize their shop floor and manufacturing processes. And then they created a complete digital twin that was able to scale to 26 of their bottling plants across the globe. Now, as they were able to do that, within 2 months, they were able to build an advanced digital analytics solution for their entire line sanitation process, which helped reduce 20% savings on their energy and 9% on water on an annual basis. So if you talk about this, it's just an example of all the work that we're doing with customers and just the significant amount of impact that we're doing. If you look at the focus areas and as to what customers should be looking at and what organizations should be doing today in the area of digital transformation, there are several ones that we could talk about, but I actually want to talk about 3 key ones. And the first one that comes to mind, obviously, and is top of mind for everyone, is how do we help them increase productivity and reduce costs? So As we all know, the cost of unplanned downtime is significant for all industries. It has a significant impact on revenue loss, it disrupts the supply chain. More importantly, it impacts the trust with our customers, which has a much spiraling effect with our business. So, how we can help reduce unplanned downtime, inefficiencies, and waste, understanding better their operations, productivity, quality metrics based on real time data is certainly very important. And I think manufacturers should be very focused on working on that. The second and the most important thing, obviously, is data is king. So, how can we improve our customer experience through integration of digital technologies like IoT, AIML, Edge, you name it, along with physical products? So, this gives manufacturers almost a real time visibility into how customers are using their products and allows them to make improvements faster, reduce defects in their supply chain, offer personalized experience to their customers, which has completely transformed the whole way in which we introduce products in the market. Sustainable manufacturing. As all of you know, Amazon has made some very significant commitments to the industry in terms of how we will reduce our net zero emissions. There are many other manufacturers who are kind of doing that. So customers today are more and more broadening their sustainability initiatives to go beyond emission reduction and to create a smart environment. So how do you help with smart cities, smart buildings, smart factories? And all of this leverages IoT, AIML to monitor energy performance, reduction of waste, and how do you align facility operations with occupancy trends. So, I mean, I can get into several details about how customers are working on it, but I would certainly say that as we work with manufacturers, there are a few areas that we certainly want them to be focused on in areas of improvement. The first one that comes to mind, I think, is speed and decision making. In the erstwhile days, we used to say death by PowerPoint. A lot of times today we say that death by proof of concept. So how can we make sure that we are enabling the different manufacturers and all the organizations around in exploring and figuring out how to use digital technologies, cloud, IoT, all of that, I think is really going to help manufacturers get started. Some of them have this invented here syndrome. So instead of figuring out everything by themselves, if they can collaborate better with other players in the industry, whether we call it system integrators, ISVs, cloud providers like AWS, Azure, whoever that you want to call it, I think is really going to help them get up to speed and get you implementing faster. And then I think we are going to talk about this quite a bit in today's session is about how do you upskill your existing personnel. So don't leave anyone behind as you are going through digital transformation. Don't look at hiring new people. It's also about figuring out how do you upskill your existing workforce and repurpose your existing staff, invest in people, and attract young talent in manufacturing. I come from a manufacturing background. It deeply impacts me when I see everybody interested in going into software or IT. I would much rather people being wanting to do more work in the manufacturing space. And there is so much of exciting work happening in this area that I do think that's an area that companies should more and more focus on. So, yeah.
Awesome. That was great. Did anyone have anything to add?
Yeah, I think so. That was a great answer. It's not there's nothing to add because I think Jada covered so much about how digital really touches every part of the business. And I love the workforce because that's a thing close to my heart. It's a passion of mine. I think one thing that's interesting though is there's an opportunity, a massive opportunity to shift still a large part of manufacturing. So the people that are leading the charge on smart manufacturing are the larger manufacturers, which is natural. They're the ones that have the resources, they have the ability, the need. But we have 98% of US manufacturing are considered small or medium. So it represents about 235,000 companies. And 75% have less than 20 employees. So I think the opportunity, the area for improvement is more, but how do we start rethinking the approach so that those small businesses can go from, as we used to joke with some of our members, they're at industry 0.0 and they want to go to industry 4.0. The beauty of people like Amazon with the cloud environments is that you can actually take an operations that's legacy approached, on-prem, old technology, lots of paper, and modernize it in one fell swoop. And when we do that, I think that's when we're really going to see the big impact of smart manufacturing, dramatically more than we've seen today, because now the entire supply chain will transform, which is, I think, the opportunity, and also where the big manufacturers are coming to us and saying, we figured this out internally. We need to figure out who's in our supply chain and how to get them to transform. So more of the same. And I also think it's a huge opportunity to do light switch changes for some of those businesses. Overnight, they become a modern, mature, smart manufacturing facility.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, it's great to hear. One thing I wanted to call out, Jade, I love, you hear the term smart manufacturing all the time, but it was refreshing to hear the term smart environment and how that is just as important a priority area as well. So especially in today's landscape, I'm going to pocket that term smart environment. So it's great.
Everything is smart right now, Daniel.
Right. Exactly.
Smart factories, smart homes, smart environment, smart cities. We all are getting smarter.
Could not agree more. So another thing I wanted to bring up, a recent State of Smart Manufacturing report highlighted that 40% of manufacturers say they lack the ability to use data to make decisions to outpace the competition in 2023 compared to last year. The report also states a third of that data goes unused. What are your thoughts on these results, and how could this be improved? Bernardino, did you want to start?
Yeah, it's so whenever you get into data, and I think Jaida said this, right? You want to take that data and not just have data. It's like, how do we make it actionable? How do we kind of shift things? The challenge that we always see when people visit our facility, we show them Industry 4.0, and they're like, great, what data? How do I take this? How do I adopt it? It's like, what are you trying to solve? Like, we have to start there, because the fear I have is that we're going to collect so much data and we're going to drown in the data, and then people are going to be like, I don't know what to get out of this because I can't get any learnings out of it. And so we try to get people to think about that. What am I trying to solve? And then the data comes from it. That said, once you go down that path, you don't get the benefit of Industry 4.0 without data. It's like it all hinges on having that data and integrating it, whether it's that kind of smart maintenance program where it tells you when it needs repairing. Think about that, extrapolate it out. Collect more data, collect more learnings, put more AI and ML. Now, not only does it tell you, hey, I have a problem building, here's how you should fix it. And now it becomes the point where it truly is making the workers more effective. But I always struggle with those small businesses. I find when I'm on these panels, I'm always talking about those small businesses. We met with a tier 1 manufacturer. They have an entire smart manufacturing program. They have a smart supply chain program. Everything's great. And they said, most of the people pull out paper that they hand type in information into our portal, and they mistype some information. And now all of a sudden I can't track assets through the supply chain because of a human error. And so we have to think about, not only do we build those programs that generate all the data we want, but that we put in place programs to clean the data and make sure that it's correct from the start. I'll give one more example, and then I'll turn over to the rest of the group. We did a program with a top tier manufacturer that wanted to build digital twins to optimize their production planning and scheduling. It was a great idea, right? They were in pandemic response. They were a vaccine manufacturer. They said, we're going to build a digital twin. Through the process, what they found out is they had 30 years of data, and most of it was bad. So the good that came out of it was they launched a program to clean their data. And so today they have much stronger data, and now they're using that to build all these programs on top. So you have to understand the problem you're solving, and then you have to get it down to what's the quality of my data, and how do we make sure we have good data in order to make it actionable. So 2 examples that come to mind in this process. The opportunity is huge, so I don't want to diminish it with these type of challenges, and recognize we overcame those challenges with those partners. So.
Another issue that we see in using the data, and it goes back to what Jada talked about earlier, which was the effective use of talent and bringing talent in. And you can either upskill existing talent to become significantly better at data analysis, but even then, that's really going to be historical analysis. Unfortunately, human brains just don't work fast enough yet for true real-time condition-based or real-time predictive analysis. At least I haven't met anybody yet that can do that with consistency and accuracy over a long period of time. Well, or the other side is understanding where the talent sits and the limitations of people in general, and then upskilling the tools to hide a significant amount of complexity in that analysis. And the best example I can give is, why did the Mac become such a popular desktop computer back in the mid 80s? And it was because a significant amount of complexity was hidden. Before that, you had a nice non-graphical based interface. You got to use command line programming, and that was difficult for people. I was young myself, but I learned how to code this little rocket ship in low res graphics that was sitting on my nice Apple IIe hanging out there. And when the Mac operating system came out, and when the GUI-based Windows operating system came out, it allowed for everyone to be a technical user. And then again, another example is when the iPad was launched. My son, who's 14 now, when he was 5, he was learning how to code on the iPad. It was very, very generic, but it was more than a 5-year-old could learn for coding 10, 15 years prior. And that's where being able to upskill analytics to make them to have processes on how to, as Berardino said, cleanse the data, be built in, and transform the data for usability, be built into those particular tools, allows for talent to become much more effective in then creating, what do I want my predictive algorithms to look like in the future, and what data am I going to use to drive improvements in quality or machine performance, all of the fundamental KPIs that underline typically Industry 4.0 initiatives.
Yeah, and I would like to just add to what Sean and Bernardino mentioned. Bernardino mentioned about he spends a lot of time talking about small manufacturers and how they are grappling with data. I actually work with small, medium, and the large manufacturers too. And I strongly believe that culture plays such a big role in the entire transformation journey is just amazing. I mean, some things have to come top down, and digital transformation as a journey has to come top down from leadership. It's just not meant to be going bottoms up. And I think there's a long way that even the leadership of the organizations have to traverse for them to understand how it is impacting their business, how it is helping make decisions that will help the company be in a very different spot years from now. It's not just a near-term thing, it's a long-term decisions that they're making and the investments they need to make for that. So people, culture, all of these soft things actually become the crux of the entire problem that we are solving than the technology transformations that we're trying to do.
Awesome. Yeah, I love how you each gave kind of a different answer, but it really built on each other. Everything from the quality of data, but then making sure you have the right technology in place to make that data usable, to empower people within the company to be able to leverage that data, and then understanding the culture of your company. It all really goes together. So thank you all for that. So moving this discussion to data integration and collaboration in the context of smart manufacturing. One key element of smart manufacturing is enabling product data connectivity, usability, and reusability across multiple platforms, domains, and systems. The challenge we see not only lies across companies, suppliers, OEMs, however, as well as data collaboration internally across business units or individual domains. What data-related challenges are you seeing, and how should organizations address them?
Well, the largest challenge and the most straightforward answer to this is standardization. Everyone should use the exact same units of measurement, the exact same definitions, the exact same language around the entire globe in perpetuity, and that would solve that problem. I kid with that because that's something that is probably never going to ever occur, because typically when companies talk about how do we enable data for reusability, it all goes back to standardization. And while standardization is important, I'll say there also has to be the understanding of what drives the standardization of that data and its meaning as you go forward. And again, another example that I'd like to throw out just to give a parallel is if you look at the width of a railroad track, 4 feet 8.5 inches, which is really, it's kind of an odd measurement. You think, boy, where'd that come from? Well, that came from roads in Europe. Well, where'd the roads in Europe come from? They came from Roman roads. Well, where'd the Roman roads come from? Came from the width of a Roman chariot. And the width of the Roman chariot was determined by the width of 2 horses next to each other. So the railroad tracks around the world are standardized to the width of 2 horses that walk the earth in Roman times, which is great. Railroad tracks railroad cars all work fluidly with differing tracks because they're all standardized to that particular gauge. However, moving forward, that might not be the best mode of transportation, especially when you consider changing data and acquiring new data is now slightly easier than relaying hundreds of thousands of miles of railroad track around the world. So that's where having the ability to understand meaning behind data, understand where that standardization comes from, and yet be able to translate that as companies move forward with their new data needs is going to be the best way to address this issue of we've got a lot of data coming out of our smart systems. We need to know what it means. We need to be able to make use of it now as well as in the future, and with our ecosystem of supply chain partners, because without that, that's going to really inhibit the scalability of smart manufacturing as it's able to be implemented around the world.
You get a little bit of a chuckle because we did a project with Software AG around supply chain, and so we used web methods. It was a great way to pull together a whole bunch of data that's supposedly the same type of data, and not one of them was represented the same way. So how do you pull it together into a common platform and then try to make it abstracted? So above it, you don't care where the data came from. You just care about, I can work with it from here up. But what's interesting in manufacturing in the US today is that I don't know of any company that has got one unified system. Everybody I meet is like, well, we're completely standardized on X, except for this company that we bought last year, and they have a whole different system. Or, well, we're trying to standardize on X, but every system can't transition. So I think we have to give ourselves credit that it's like we're going to have to deal with what data we have and the way it is, and focus on how we can make it usable, because it's not, the end goal is not to have data. The end goal is to make a decision with that data. And I'm going to feed something to Jaida. It's like, to me, the cloud type environments for a lot of businesses is the transition, because if they're on their legacy systems, and like I met a manufacturer that still was proud that they had a mainframe sitting in the corner, and it's like, wow, that thing's surprising, it still works. And they don't go to 1990s technology. They have an opportunity now to really jump forward, and as part of that transformation, take advantage of all the technology that's been developed without having to re-implement it all locally. And that boils down to cloud environments, standard systems for that, but also the software is like web methods that can abstract out all these different sources of data to make the top part more actionable.
Awesome. Was there anything else you wanted to add to that, Jada? Perfect. Sorry for my dog. Moving to the next question. For the second year in a row, manufacturers are the #1 cybersecurity threat target. How do you counter it, both as a manufacturer as well as a solution provider?
Yeah, I'll start and just share what we do as the National Center. So that metric, Danielle, that you shared, that it's 2 years in a row is #1, that's ahead of industries like finance, insurance, all these other ones. It wakes people up, including manufacturing leaders. But then you find out, oh yeah, we've had like multiple failed ransomware attacks. And the first thing we always tell people is start with your people, because they're your biggest risk, but they're your biggest asset. And then what we tell them is use one of the NIST guidelines to assess where you're at, whether you use the simple ones, all the way, like the cybersecurity framework, all the way up to the more advanced, like SP 800, 171, which is quite an effort to assess. But you have to start with understanding where you're at. The challenge then is people look at their gaps and they get overwhelmed, especially the smaller businesses, right? Because they don't have a CISO, they don't have a CIO, they don't have a VP of IT. They're struggling because, as a friend of mine runs a factory, it's a 10-person company, and his IT person is literally the high school kid down the street who he was freaked out when he went to college because he wouldn't have an IT person in town, right? They have to start where they're at, but then they also have to get some advice on, like, listen, there are things you can do that are low-hanging fruit. 2 examples I always tell people. First, if you're a small business and your internet is provided by an internet provider that gave you a router or a modem or a gateway 15 years ago and you've never upgraded it, change it. That immediately will improve your cyber posture. The next one, spend $4 a month to go get an online training for cybersecurity courses, and then cyber attack your own employees. We fish attack our own employees because I would rather they fail and learn from us rather than external, and that costs $4. Because that's the other fear on manufacturing, is we have to get them to understand there are a lot of low-cost ways you can improve your posture. The cloud-based environment can be very secure when you make that transition, but you have to plan for it at that moment. So ask the question, are we setting this up in a secure way? And I like to focus on simple things when I talk about manufacturers in this space, because the reality is that has the biggest impact immediately. Then you can start putting the other pieces, but you've started your journey. And the last piece I'll say is, manufacturers, as they look to secure their operations, it is not a destination, it is a journey. You will never be 100% protected. You have to just constantly be improving and being diligent and aware, because that's what it takes to stay secure, because the people that are attacking are doing it because there's money involved, and they're not going to just try to attack once. They'll keep attacking because they're making money doing this. So simple solutions, focus on people, start with the low-hanging fruit. You'll dramatically increase our protection as a nation.
Yeah, and I will just add one thing to what Bernardino mentioned is, you don't have to figure it out yourself. There are people and there are millions and billions of dollars being spent on figuring out how to ensure manufacturer security. It is a huge problem. I speak to customers, starting from the folks who are running an oil rig to people who are, running an airspace, aircraft manufacturing organization. Each one of them are equally worried because the data is just so careful, just important for them. However, when it comes to really making decisions, you will see manufacturers deciding to do things in-house or figuring out mom and pop shops to give them the solutions that comes at a much lower price. Security is not something that you look at in a short-term perspective. You have to look at long-term and say that what are the risks that that looks at your face. And I think that one should always look at experience and just the amount of research and investment that has gone into building those and providing them. So, I work for AWS. One of the key differentiating factors of AWS for our customers is that security is the most important thing for us and for our customers. So we take a lot of pride in it and we take it very closely to our heart. But it just takes a lot of effort for us to be able to provide that to our customers. It doesn't come easy. So just something to keep in mind.
Can I add one that builds on that people also think it's expensive to do cybersecurity? There are a tremendous amount of free resources. We have a cyber resource out, Pitch MXD, free resources. But the Department of Defense runs an entire program that has free resources. NIST, through Department of Commerce, free resources. If you're a manufacturer, there is what's called a manufacturing extension partnership in every state, as well as Puerto Rico. They're there to help manufacturers. And one of the things they help them with is cybersecurity. It's a really important point. They don't have to do it themselves. And I think some people feel they have to figure it all out on their own. They just don't need to.
One last point I'd like to add is the usage of resources. So 20 years ago, manufacturers said all of our data has to be on-premise, locked behind firewalls, and that's where we're going to keep it, and that's where it's going to be secure. And that's great. Unfortunately, for the small and mid-sized manufacturers, to Berardino's point, there are a lot of resources that you can use on your own that are available to you, but there's also significant changes in technologies, because I think Berardino phrased it up perfectly, which was your talent. It's your greatest opportunity and it's your greatest threat. And if you're using your current resources, one of which are cloud-based providers, such as Amazon, where you have applications that are built and live on the cloud, those are continuously updated from a security perspective. Whereas your hardware device that's sitting on the shop floor that you bought 10 years ago that you haven't updated any firmware patches for, that is the higher security risk than using cloud-based applications that are typically updated continuously. So it's understanding what is the best way forward for me to have a secure environment with the technologies that I have available, as well as, like Berardino said, ensuring that your talent is best able to understand where security breaches can exist and what they can do to avoid them.
Yeah, awesome points. And having experienced some internal phishing emails, it also turns into like a game among colleagues as well. And you're kind of the one that's looked at if you didn't catch that phishing email or you didn't send that up, you thought that was a real email. So I love that bit that you shared, Bernd, because it is easy to do, but it also adds a little friendly competition among some colleagues. So very good tip there. Okay, so based on what we just heard about security and how critical it how critical is a data strategy, especially with the latest trends in AI and generative AI, and how do you see AI impacting manufacturing?
So Daniel, I'll break up the two questions. I'll first talk about the criticality of data strategy and how, especially in the latest trends in the Gen AI and in the Gen AI space. So, in the last couple of months now, breakthroughs in AI/ML have been in the headlines. You open any article, any newspaper, the news, it's all about ChatGPT and what every organization is trying to do in this area. I think the emerging and evolving capabilities of this technology, it promises immense new business opportunities for all organizations. However, the speed of this revolution has made it extremely hard for organizations and consumers to assess what these breakthroughs really mean for them. A data strategy has been critical for many years now. We have been dabbling with data for some time now, for a few decades. However, with Gen AI, we have just gone up several notches. So organizations that have already used data throughout their businesses obviously find themselves in a better position to move faster and more effectively with Gen AI. And then the ones which have a mature data strategy, they are even better off because they have the ability to approach Gen AI by encouraging organization-wide learning about how the capabilities of Gen AI can impact the different processes and their businesses, where it fits, where it doesn't, and how it can potentially free up time for people like you, me, and everybody to undertake activities like Gen AI and not work on other areas. So, to my earlier point, data strategy, Gen AI enablement is very much a top-down approach. Change management sits at the heart of it, and it's very important that we not take it easy. I work with customers on an everyday basis, and there are 5 areas that I always tell them that they should be very well aware of as they're grappling with this Gen AI issue. The first one is that get focused on your cloud journey. Don't try to do this without the cloud. I hear customers saying that, can I do Gen AI by being on premises? And my question is that you want your teams to be focused on problem solving and innovation, not on managing an underlying complexity and dabbling with the cost of enabling infrastructure and licenses. The cloud is the enabler for Gen AI. It helps make cost-effective data lakes, sustainably provision GPUs and compute, high-speed networking, you name it all. So doing without the cloud, I think, is going to be a very uphill task. So address that piece. And this is not coming from somebody who works from AWS. I'm not trying to sell AWS over here. It is just what is going to help them get easier on the Gen AI journey. The next one that comes to mind is the implementing the end-to-end data strategy. So if you look at the most beautiful house, if it is built on dodgy foundation, we all know it's not going to last. So the same is true in the world of ML. With Gen AI, quality trumps, and the quantity of business data that we have available is really going to make all the difference. We have to think beyond the technology. We have been talking about it quite a bit. We want Gen AI to be able to do something. So how do we prioritize diversity of skills and worldviews and ensure that the folks who are engaged in your organization in creating and using the models actually are able to represent the diversity of your customers? So the more diverse your thoughts are, the more diverse your workforce is, the better it is going to help you ensure the relevance and the early identification of the potential biases that you might have in your organization that could be hindrances in the future. I've talked about this earlier. No different focus on upskilling your people. The continued emergence of AI as a profoundly impactful tool requires skills which have not been used in the past and which will very much be in demand in the future. So make sure that you are investing in your people to develop those skills, and don't just look at the small group of people. It should be an organization-wide effort. And then start considering the use cases. I love the saying, fall in love with the problem, not with the solution. So as you're talking to customers, figure out where Gen AI can really help solve the problem, instead of just saying that, I'm going to use Gen AI without really knowing how it's going to really help your problem. So I think if you look at all of this is kind of where data strategy is really important. If any organization is thinking of these few things, it's not rocket science. We should be able to get along with Gen AI pretty easily. To your other question, Daniel, about how important is a robust data strategy to enable a robust enterprise-wide AI strategy for manufacturing, my answer is extremely important. It is early days for Gen AI use cases in the area of in the factory. However, we are hearing from many of our customers, the factory leaders, who are talking about how Gen AI might help optimize their overall equipment effectiveness, for example, or even helping with predictive maintenance. So considering Gen AI needs large amounts of data to create the foundation models, manufacturers have a very unique industry challenge, because we know in the field of manufacturing, we have a large section of manufacturers have not made the investments in making data available. So having access to the data, I think, is going to be very important, and hence the data strategy for industrial is going to be the foundation that's going to help make it successful. So I think manufacturers need to get over the hump of whether we should be having a data strategy or not. It's going to come to how quickly you can have a data strategy and how quickly you can deploy it, so you can embrace more, I would say, evolving technologies like Gen AI, and I'm sure there is a lot more to come in the future that's gonna hit us like a train wreck. And it's facing us in our face. So sooner we get to it, the better it is for us.
I want to maybe just reinforce, because that was a great answer and it was so complete. The piece that's really important out of that we see is people come to us when a new technology comes out, because we're an innovation institute. We're supposed to have all the answers. And they're like, what am I going to do about Meta? What am I going to do about generative AI? What am I going to, and it's, people lose sight of the fact that don't fall in love with the problem. Don't fall in love with the technology, I believe is the quote you said. I love it. It's a great way to see it. It's like, these are tools to solve problems, but if you focus on the tool and not the problem, you're not really helping. And the data strategy is what we also tell people is before you start thinking about all the ways you're going to use the technology, you better start thinking about the data, because for most businesses, that's where they struggle, is the data. They either have it and it's in the wrong place and they can't connect it, or they don't have it. So having a discussion about how they're going to use AI, for example, to do predictive maintenance. Well, if you're not pulling the data out of the piece of equipment, you can't do predictive maintenance. And so it really is a holistic approach. And the good news is people are making that transition. Yeah. Jade and I, you're my new best friend, because you're always bringing up the people. It's always about the people. You have to have your workforce that is part of the understanding the problem, part of solving the problem. But if you don't educate them and give them the tools that they need so that they can take advantage of these technologies, then the technology adoption will not be successful.
Yeah, just one last point, because I agree with what Jada and Berardino both said, but it comes down to, while generative AI is great, the underpinning data strategy enables, do I need to use it? Can I use it for whatever issue I want to solve in the future? And getting that interoperable data strategy is critical. because it's not just having pieces of data, it's having pieces of data with the context around that data. If I want to build a predictive model and I've got 6 months worth of data on a particular machine, I have to have their faults. And then I also have to have the maintenance actions that were done from the EAM or CMMS. And that provides the context for a data scientist to even build a predictive model there. And that's where it's that interoperability that provides the context to be able to use emerging technologies like generative AI in the future, if it's warranted. On the other hand, it might not be, because looking back at the RFID push of the early aughts, RFID, Walmart came out with a mandate. Everybody's got to tag everything. You turn to manufacturers and they said, well, wait a minute. Our inventory accuracy is 99.7%. RFID will take us to 99.9%, but what's the cost of the infrastructure? What's the cost compared to that benefit? It might not be there, but having a flexible and sound data strategy, you can decide, how am I going to use my data in the future if a new technology is available that can advance or resolve a specific challenge that I'm having in my operating environment.
Throw one last piece in this, because this is it's a great story. We did some work for the Department of Defense, their internal manufacturing capability, the organic industrial base. If you tour some of these facilities, it has equipment from, I'm going to exaggerate just for effect, pre-World War II, probably not that far off, all the way to the most modern cutting edge equipment in the same building. When they think about a data strategy, because the quote I'm stealing is from a retired general from the Army, but I think it applies to a lot of U.S. manufacturing and discrete. We have a 20th century infrastructure to meet a 21st century need. There's a lot of old equipment that is very good at what it does. You cannot include it into your data strategy by just assuming I'm going to take it all out and replace it with new equipment, because we're not building a lot of new factories. We're not doing massive renovations across the entire industry. So people sometimes build a strategy that falls apart in that point. But there are solutions to solve that problem. And it's sometimes really cheap. You can put sensors on a piece of equipment and pull current data off of it. And now you can generate a whole bunch of usable data, OEE, other things around it, predictive maintenance, all these pieces off a relatively small investment. And with a standard interface, you've now lifted the entire operations to the same level as that brand new piece of equipment that has MT Connect and all this data coming off of it. And so the data strategy, I think, also has to reflect the reality of your business operations. And then don't assume you have to replace all your equipment. Because that is one thing we find is people come to our facility and they say, I can't afford $1 million piece of equipment. It's not going to happen. It's like, but you can get 80% of that value, to Sean's point, with a small investment. That's worth it from their perspective.
Awesome responses. Thank you all for contributing to that question. And just to reiterate it, in case the audience didn't get a chance to jot it down, Jada, you've been dropping gems this whole webinar. So it was fall in love with the problem and not the solution. I think I'll print it out and put it above my computer because it can relate to so many things, not just technology. So I loved that tidbit. So awesome. I would definitely love to take this opportunity to open it up to the audience, see if they have any questions for our panelists. And I think I do see some coming in now. So let's see, to go ahead and touch on these. The first one, can you share your perspective on the significance of a digital thread as it relates to a supply chain ecosystem? Feel free for anyone to jump in there.
I'm happy to kick it off.
Sure.
The pandemic taught us that we have very little visibility into our national supply chains, right? We were shocked at certain things. Not going to drop names, but some manufacturers were like, I didn't think I relied on China in any way.
Yeah.
They knew they did, but they were looking at their simple supply chain, right? But realistically, they don't have any visibility past kind of the second level of their suppliers. And the data sharing is relying on the fact that we actually have illuminated and know who's in our supply chains. The data sharing is relying on the fact that that supply chain is also willing to share data. So I think the next adoption of Industry 4.0 is 100% focused on getting the supply chain to start becoming illuminated and start becoming open to sharing that data. Because if we do that, we will shift the entire supply chain to smart supply chains. Going back to what Jaida said, we can now say we have smart supply chains. And today, a lot of times, we just have a supply chain that is smart to one level. So I think this is critical, and I think the opportunity is there, and the technology is there. It's not a question of technology. It's more on how do we shift the mindset? How do we change the culture so that people start adopting the solutions?
Yeah. And, adding to what Bernardino mentioned, the pandemic certainly was an eye-opener for us in many different ways. It paralyzed our life in ways that we didn't even imagine, in lots of ways. In lots of ways, it made us realize that how much dependent we are on supply chain. But having said that, I do think that as organizations look at sales and operations planning, it shouldn't just remain, it has made them realize that it shouldn't just remain limited to their own processes. It should go across the supply chain to their suppliers too, because the inability for suppliers to provide visibility into how their processes are working and how their supply chain is working kind of stops the process at some point in time, where organizations then go like, okay, so if I don't have visibility into there, I'm not able to plan it. And mostly for organizations which work on large lead time items, they don't have a whole lot of suppliers for these. So when they're dependent on one or two suppliers and they're not ready to provide them with the products when they need it, it just can become extremely paralyzing for them and stop the process and the manufacturing system. So I do think that organizations are becoming more and more aware. This is becoming a topic of conversation among organizations as they are identifying suppliers. And when they have suppliers that they have been working with for years, it's actually heartening to see that how they bring them along in the digital transformation journey, which is what we need to see as we get to the next level. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because there was a recent McKinsey survey, and out of this survey, they determined that recent, probably 6 months ago or so, but 80% of smart manufacturing initiatives fail because their supply chain isn't properly integrated. And it gives you pause to really think about the advantages of having an integrated supply chain that communicate in a unobtrusive, on-demand manner with each other, so that everyone understands what's happening at any given time at the various nodes in a complicated global supply chain. So Berardino said the pandemic really shone a light on a lot of companies that didn't realize the risks that they were running with their supply chains in their current states. Supply chains have been optimized to run in a cost-efficient manner for years, which is incredibly difficult to do when it's spanning overseas. You run a risk that if one node breaks, the entire supply chain can shut down quickly, especially if you don't have enough inventory for those long lead components or long lead parts that are needed to build critical pieces of finished goods. So that's where it's really interesting that digital thread component of being able to understand what's going on through my entire supply chain at the unit level provides a heightened level of visibility that magnifies its value when it occurs, as well as with the small manufacturing industry 4.0 initiatives that are seen on the shop floor.
Awesome. Thank you guys for that. It truly is amazing, the things you realized during the pandemic, and the supply chain effects was definitely one among others. So thank you for all your contributions there. The next question that I have from the audience, if we are new to this, what would be the key steps in establishing a smart manufacturing program?
I would say the first step, Daniel, would be realization that it is important for the organization, and the lack of it won't help us get to evolving our business and delivering the business outcomes that we need to get to. So I think that's the first step. Once leaders realize that smart manufacturing is something that is important to be done, but there is no other way around it, I think is absolutely the first step in that process, in the journey.
And building on that, once you have that buy-in, start with small wins. We've seen a lot of these people, like companies start with this grandiose, we're going to modernize everything at once, and they'd struggle to win because the costs involved, the effort. Start with small focused wins and build off of that. But don't be stuck in pilot purgatory, because that's one of the challenges. You just focused on the small wins. You have to have, as Jada said, the vision of this is how we're going to transform, and this is the path to get there. And then I would say include your teams, because the top down sets the vision, the bottom up helps you figure out how to implement that vision. And to build on the previous question, I would include the supply chains immediately too. Like bring them into maybe not immediately, but bring them into the conversation fairly early on, because sometimes they can be your ally in that transformation, so that you're not only transforming your internal operations, you're immediately transforming the entire supply chain. And Jada didn't say it, so I'll say it. People, people, people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Sean, did you have anything to add?
No, it's good answers from everyone.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, I know I see a few more questions. We will definitely circle back to these post-webinar and get your responses via email. Thank you guys for your engagement, and big kudos to our panelists for leading this awesome discussion. I know I certainly got a lot out of it, and I'm sure our audience has too. So thank you all for your time and different perspectives you had to offer, and for sharing that. So thank you all for joining us, and this does conclude our webinar, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Daniel. Really enjoyed the discussion, and looking forward to more of these.
Perfect.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.